Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. JJ Virgin is an incredibly successful entrepreneur. She has built a health and fitness empire, complete with a line of nutrition products, millions of fans, and 4 New York Times best-selling books. But all of these accomplishments pale in comparison to the moment she unexpectedly found herself at her son's hospital bedside. At that moment, she had a choice that would mean the difference between his life and his death. Now, I'm not going to tell you how the story ended. You'll find out soon enough. But I will tell you that today's interview with JJ contains an absolutely priceless lesson for each of us that I will never, ever forget. So I will keep this short and sweet, and without further ado, please help me welcome JJ Virgin. JJ Virgin, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to finally have you on.
Yay, thank you. It's an honor.
Absolutely. So you and I got to know each other a little bit about a year ago through Mr. Joe Polish, surprise, surprise, Mr. Networker Connector. And through his Genius Network 25K group, which was awesome. And that was the first time that I've been exposed to your work and your absolutely unbelievable story. And so we definitely need to start there because it's, as a parent, it's definitely one that pulled at my heartstrings. And I think a lot of people relate to that as well. So I'm not going to spoil it, but if you would, I would love it if you would bring people up to speed.
You know, it's interesting, Mike. The first time I really told this story was, it was like 3 years ago at a 25K annual meeting, and it was, almost all guys in the audience. And I look out in the audience and I'm seeing all these guys, grown men crying. So it was, I get so used to it now. But when I've watched the documentary about it, because I made a documentary and a book about this, I will still watch it like as a viewer and start to cry because it is that unbelievable. So I'm known for the book, The Virgin Diet, out in the health world. But what people don't realize is a couple weeks before that book was getting ready to come out. And I'll set the stage so I have this book coming out. I am a single parent. I am the financial support for my family. And I'm one of those people that goes all in on something. So when I got this book deal, I took the entire advance. I invested it all in the marketing efforts. I did a public television show. I'd gone all in and I'd borrowed, because I just knew this one was going to be the thing, right? The shift. And so it is a crazy busy time for me. And it's a couple weeks before my kids. I have 2 boys. They're 15 and 16. And my 16-year-old is out at dusk going for a walk to a friend's house. And he's a victim of a hit and run. And no one except the woman who hit him, and we know it was a woman because one person drove up right afterwards and saw her get out of her car, look back, gasp, and drive off. And, she and my son are the only ones who really know what happened. We get to the hospital where he'd been airlifted, and we find out that he has a torn aorta, and that's what killed Princess Diana. It kills 90% of people right on the scene. His was hanging on by an onion skin, and the doctors said, this has to be repaired sometime in the next 24 hours. It's going to rupture. But we can't repair it here because he's got multiple brain bleeds. He was in a deep coma. He still had brain activity, though. That was the key thing. So they said, so you're just going to have to let him go. And it was interesting. My 15-year-old son was with me. And I think this is like such an amazing part of the story when you think about a 15-year-old son. I don't know how old your kids are, but for someone to be this astute, he looked at this doctor and the doctor said, he'd never survived the airlift to the next hospital. And even if he survived that airlift, he probably wouldn't survive that surgery. And even if he were to survive both those things, he'd be so brain damaged, it wouldn't be worth it. And Bryce, my 15-year-old, looks at the doctor and says, so maybe a 0.25% chance. And the doctor said, that sounds about right, son. He goes, so we'll take those odds. Because he looks at me and goes, 0.2580, Mom, and he just kept his wits about him, kept his humor up, like while I was that first 24 hours a complete train wreck. But we airlifted him, overruled the doctors. My ex-husband's a med mal trial attorney, so he knew the right verbiage to use. That came in handy there. And the next hospital we got to was like, and it just shows you, it's gosh, we just got to the right place. This doctor who took on the case took it on in the middle of the night, assembled 5 surgical teams, used a stent to put into his aorta that was part of a trial that was no longer, on trial. He had to find it at 3 a.m. and get it airlifted over to the hospital. It wasn't supposed to be used for kids. He said, I figured I'd ask for forgiveness. Just the right person you want on your team. And so Grant survived that surgery, and then really the heavy lifting began, because he was in a deep coma, and the doctors were telling us, we don't know if he'll ever wake up. And I just stood there. I remember the first day, after the reality really kind of sunk in, and I was holding 3 fingers because everything else was bandaged or covered in road rash. And, he had 13 fractures. He had 2 orthopedic teams working on him at once. He had, rods in his femurs and casts and all sorts of stuff. And I said, Grant, because he'd always been able to feel me, and I just didn't want him to feel any fear. I just was like, I'm just going to present the most positive situation here. And I said, and I just knew he could hear me. And I said, Grant, we've got this. I just need you to fight. You're going to be better than before the accident. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Now, I got to tell you, I'm scared to death. I'm walking out of the room like feeling like I'm going to throw up, but I'm like not going to let him see any of that. And my biggest thing that I went with, and this is such a key, important takeaway in life, and it's actually one that can build resilience, is that curiosity of asking the right questions. And from that moment, I just went, you know what? He's going to be 110%. What do I need to do to get him to 110%? And that's just how I operate. And it was interesting because the hospital, as I started operating that way, first they thought I was an absolute, crazy mom, but then everyone started to shift with me and treat him differently than, this poor kid who was going to be, damaged for the rest of his life. So that's, that is the first part of the story. I'll tell you, he was in the hospital 4.5 months. I'm doing interviews out of a room that UCLA gave me. He woke up out of the coma after a couple weeks. And I was told, when he comes out of the coma, it will be ugly. And I thought they meant like, he'd wake up and scream and then turn around and look at me and say, Mom, I love you. And actually, it's been ugly it was years of ugly. Because
what was that first moment like when, is there an alarm that goes off? Hey, we've got activity. Did he just open his eyes? What was that like?
Nope. And this is where the movies really do us in, because, you see it in the movies and they just kind of one moment they wake up, they open their eyes and they're awake. Not how it happens. It happened over time. And literally this one neurosurgeon would come in every day and do titty twisters and scream in his ear.
Wow.
And I'm like thinking, this is not probably the best way to wake him up, but what do I know? But it seems pretty traumatic, and it was a big black dude. I loved this guy, but I thought, that might be a little bit terrifying to have like this 6'4" big ass dude giving you titty twisters, yelling your name. I don't know. But he woke up over time, and then his eyes opened, but they stared off into space and off to one side. And then he started to move, but he moved an arm back and forth all day long repetitively. And I'm thinking, oh crap, oh my gosh. It was such a mindset management, because every day you go, but what if, all those what ifs, what if this is all we've got, and I just keep going, nope, he's going to be 110%. What more can I find? And fortunately I have this crazy resource of the top docs around the country and the world. And I just was put an SOS out. I had the most amazing doctors coming and helping me who were top in this field. And so I knew that there was so much out there that could be done. And I just kept focusing on what we could do and trying to keep the freak out to a minimum and never around him, because I knew he didn't need to feel that energy. And in fact, Mike, he had the total near-death experience. He described where my ex-husband and I were in the waiting room, what we were wearing when he was in surgery, which is crazy. There's no picture of my ex-husband wearing a red shirt in the waiting room. There's no way he knew. He described all different parts of the hospital. He said he was, kind of meandering around, but he talked about going to the other side and the gray man asking him if he wanted to live or die. And him kind of saying he said, it's much nicer over there. He goes, but I kept hearing your voices. So I decided to come back.
Wow.
I know. Phew. I knew I could feel him. And it's just this very weird, you can't put words to it. And he said, on the other side, there's no words, there's no bodies, but it's just feelings. And I was like, I could feel it. So I kept talking to him to make sure he was coming back.
How did that, or did that change, your outlook on life after death? I don't know if you're religious or were before or after, but I mean, that's got to have a pretty profound effect on how you see life at that point.
Yeah, gosh, there are so many crazy takeaways from this situation. I've always felt like there was something more out there. I've always been fascinated by it. I never really wanted to go through it like this.
Right.
But I think that if you don't have any of those beliefs as you're going through this, you'd be really lost. It would be really hard for you to have the hope, because the one thing you have to be able to get through anything in life, whether it's business challenges, relationship challenges, health challenges, is you've got to have hope. If you don't have hope, you're done. So I don't know that for me, I put the SOS out to my entire community, both for what do you have for medical advice and pray for my son. We had every religion represented. I left no stone unturned. I'm like, we had them all. And I would walk in and he would just be glowing. But, there's things, then you look at how he got through all this that just make no sense. It doesn't even make sense. He made it off the pavement. And, there's got to be something more at work here, right?
So improvements started to be made. What did that look like? How long did it take?
Oh
when did you feel like, okay, this might turn out all right?
A couple weeks ago. It's super important to understand. It's been 4.5 years now. And I have been focused during those 4.5 years of my son will be 110%. He has a huge purpose. He's going to show the world, because 1.7 million people a year in the U.S. alone get a traumatic brain injury, and 5 million people right now disabled because of it. And there's no real good information out there. And in the hospital, we were told all you need, now it's just you wait. The brain has its own time schedule. Now, I knew that was not right. And it's not right. And that there was so much we could do, which I just did behind the doctor's backs. Once I knew they weren't up on it, I knew they'd be down on it. And I was like, forget it. We are not waiting, because the brain doesn't have its own time schedule. There's tons you can do to accelerate healing. And my son has become obsessed with how to accelerate his healing, but it has been very challenging all along the way. And it's just been holding on to what can I do to get him to be 110%. And, when you ask those questions, people start to show up along the way to help. And we've done amazing therapies with him that have been great, needle movers, which we are sharing out in the community, because there's not a lot of information about this, yet there's so many people. It is the number one cause of death in children. And there's just not a lot of info on it, and no real consistent therapies, which is crazy.
Wow, that's amazing. And the one thread that I'm pulling out of the story is, the fact that you really took a leadership position from the moment this happened till now, rather than just taking the doctor's word for it and, being a victim of circumstance. You really just totally took charge of the situation. And I loved how you mentioned that the rest of the staff around the hospital fell in line behind your mission, if you will. And I think that was everything. I don't think if you hadn't done that, the result would have been very different.
Yeah. And it actually scares me, Mike, because I think how many people that first night when the doctor says you'll have to let them go would have said, well, the doctor said to do it. And hey, most of my best friends are docs. They're people. They're going to give you their opinion. It's their opinion. That's it. Right. And I knew that I had to exhaust all resources. It's your kid. You're not going to give up on your kid. You don't give up on your kid until there's, no hope that there's no brain activity, that they've taken their last breath. But up until then, I'm fighting. And I think that that lesson can be applied to everything that you do.
Absolutely.
But I see people, it's like my favorite philosopher, Yoda, do not try, do. I see so many people just, oh, I'll try that. I come from the weight loss world. The minute someone says, I'll try that, I'm like, they're going to fail.
Absolutely.
Go all in, right?
So I think you have really started to share this mindset and your approach to life in at least one of the books that you've recently written, Miracle Mindset. Was this obviously part of one of the inspiring circumstances in your life that led to that?
Yeah, this was the big one that my agent, because my agent actually almost lost her twins and was using everything. She went through this whole thing with me, and she goes, "You've got to write this book. This is saving people." And what it required me to do, because so many people were like, "How did you do that? I could never do that." And I'm thinking, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, "Hey, can you launch a New York Times bestseller, save your kid's life, do all this?" I go, no way. But we're never better than when we're challenged, and we are stronger than we think. And so I started to look back and go, how was I able to do this? And, you peel back the onion and think about all the people we know, because I know we have so many friends in common. And I'll just pick Joe, for example. Joe is a great example of people who are successful. The big common thread that I saw running through all of them is they'd gone through crap. They'd gone through massive stuff, and they were better because of it. And in fact, the more successful people just had built more resilience. They'd gone through more stuff, and instead of rolling over and being a victim, they showed up stronger. And every time they brought that courage in and they showed up stronger, they built more resilience till you get to a point. I mean, like my 19-year-old son, Bryce, who told the doctor, "We'll take those odds." He's a badass. What are you going to say to a kid who walked up to a doctor and said, "No, I'm not going to let my brother die. We're going to overrule you," and fought for his brother's life. My son, Grant, at 25% of people with brain injuries, has been suicidal multiple times over the last 4.5 years. And I watched my other son, take him down to the ground so he wouldn't hurt himself, get on top of him, hold him down and say, "I'm not going to," while Grant's screaming and yelling, "I hate you," and saying, "I love you. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself. I'm all in. I'm your family. I've got you." Mm-hmm. What are you going to, what are you going to say to a kid like this? Super, super resilient. And so I think it's a reframe of all this stuff that shapes us. Tell me a time, Mike, in life where everything was going awesome for you, life's perfect, and you grew.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't ever happen. Yeah. We happen when it gets ugly, as the doctor said to me, and as awful and painful as it can be in the moment, because this has been a rough 4.5 years, and thank God for hair color, because I probably would be gray, but it's also been the best 4 years, and coming out of it now, it's really taken me to such a higher level in life. And so that's what I saw. And as I started to look at it, I went, success leaves clues. There's so many lessons that really both came out of it, but were the way I was coming into this that made me realize, in health, people don't buy prevention. They generally tend to wait till they have the heart attack, they get cancer, and they're like, "Oh my God, I got to take care of myself." Mindset's the exact same way. If I hadn't have built the mindset I had before this situation happened, I probably would have curled up into a fetal position and crumbled and gotten paralyzed. Mm-hmm. But in my early 30s, I was a personal trainer. I had a personal training business, and I was in my 3rd or 4th graduate school. And my then client, who was a self-made multimillionaire entrepreneurial woman who was just amazing, said, "Hey, why are you in grad school? What are you trying to do?" And I go, "I'm trying to become more successful." She goes, "Well, what are you going to do when you graduate? You're going to love this." I said, "I'm going to go get my PhD." She goes, "Why?" I go, "Because I want to be more successful." She goes, "Those don't actually correlate." And I go, "They don't?" Because that's all I was ever taught was you go to college, you go to grad school, you just keep getting education. And I've seen some of the most successful people in our world, and they didn't even graduate college. I mean, some of them barely made it through high school. And so she goes, "I'll teach you." And I said, "Great." I literally sold my personal training business, and moved into her house. It was like the Karate Kid, you know? I thought she was going to teach me business, but it was 6 months of intense mindset training. And it has changed. It changed everything. And it's how I show up this way now.
You know, it's the foundation. It's the rewiring of the mental software.
Yeah.
And we all start there. You know, for me, it was discovering the self-help section of the Barnes and Noble, in college.
Ooh, who are your favorites? I was obsessed.
My very first book that I ever read. Now, the funny part is I remember feeling like embarrassed that I was buying it. I was probably 18 or 19 years old, so still probably senior year in high school. And I was in the self-help section, and I was like, "Is this for people who have problems and need help?" But a book caught my eye that was called The Aladdin Factor by Jack Canfield. And it was this nice little short book that all of a sudden opened up a new universe of possibilities and a different path for a future. And that was it. And then I was like, oh, okay, I have a choice that I can make here. And, you know, pursuing a life of freedom and abundance sounds a hell of a lot better than, you know, showing up in a cube every day. So.
Yep, there you have it. Well, I'm not employable. I've had one job. I think probably all the listeners are the same. It's like I had one job, 3 months, fired. Like, all right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about business. You know, we've got an audience of a few 100,000 entrepreneurs. They're going to hear this. They're in every single stage of business development that you can think of. What have been some of the big key lessons learned or decisions that you've made along your career that ended up really allowing you to achieve the kind of success that you've had?
I'd say one of the biggest ones that shifted everything for me was investing in mentors who've already done what I want to do. And I say it that way because there's two key points there. Number one, I didn't go try to pick someone's brain for free. You know, don't you love that? Can I go to lunch with you and pick your brain? I'm like, oh man, you're not going to I know because I've learned it in my weight loss business is anytime I gave anything away for free, people didn't have the success. There is something that happens with that emotional exchange when you lay down cash, usually more than what you can afford, that changes everything. And I'll tell you about my first mentor because it was crazy. And then making sure that you actually hire someone who's done what you want to do. So my first real mentor beyond Kay, who taught me all the mindset stuff, was I went out to dinner with Joe Mercola, and he was going, and it was gosh, I think 2006, and he told me to read The 4-Hour Workweek, which I read, and it was like, you know, this new world opened up. And so I started going and listening to all the little free teleclasses, which give you just enough to be dangerous, right? And I stumbled upon this gal, Allie Brown. And so I studied her stuff for a year, and then I went to one of her events. Now, I'd never been to one of these events. I didn't know what a mastermind was. I didn't know what, you know, pitches from the stage were, none of this. And I'd done tons and tons of personal development stuff. But, you know, the big thing with those personal development guys is they had no idea how to sell, right? So I just listened to all their Nightingale Conant tapes. So I go to this event, and she's pitching these masterminds, and I'm had brought a bunch of friends with me, and I'm like, oh, I'm joining whatever her high-level one was. I'm like, I'm in that. I'm doing that. And it was $100,000. Mm. And at the time, I was in a massive business shift. I just started studying all the online stuff. I'd left what I was doing. And I was I'd gotten hired to create these spas all over Europe. It was supposed to be this $500,000 a year stipend and then bonuses and stuff like that. And so I thought, no problem, I've got that coming in. And I sign up for it, put down my credit card and write her a check, find out that at the end of that week, it was that week in 2007 or 2008 when everything crashed, including that opportunity. And I have no money. Like, I'd been tapering off of everything else I was doing to do this new thing. And I'm the single mom, right? And I'm got nothing. And I've signed up for this $100,000 mastermind. And I thought to myself, well, I really need this now, right? I mean, now I really need this. And I can't tell you how I paid for that $100,000 mastermind. I just got into such massive action. I burned out my adrenals for sure that year, but I did $550,000 that first year because I was going to make make every penny of that thing count, and you almost wonder, like with the Virgin diet, when I was in the hospital with Grant, and I remember standing there thinking, well, now this book really has to make it. And when your back's against the wall, when it's a matter of feeding your kids and you do not have any choices and failure is not an option, it's like, it's just too bad we can't always live in that place. I kind of don't want to say that, it's like a jinx, but you see such a difference when someone has to be successful versus, it's like, okay, well, that would be nice to have. It's like, well, what if you had to have it? You had to be successful. So that was really the starting point, was hiring Allie. And then when I knew I wanted to do New York Times bestseller, because my first book is one no one's heard about because I didn't know how to do it correctly. And so I didn't follow up a plan. And then when I wanted to do that, I hired Brendan. And it was back before Brendan was really Brendan,
So Brendan Burchard for...
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Brendan was amazing because it was just as Brendan was really starting to take off. And I kind of had the sense no one will probably be able to get to this point again where I was having private one-on-one days with him. I was going to say
he was available to hire.
Yes, he was available. And I remember looking at this going, and first of all, it was $45,000 and I thought it was a deal, right? Mm-hmm. After the $100,000. But I hired him and I'm thinking, this guy's about to go big and no one will ever get to this again. And he was so generous. Like, he flew to LA when my son was in the hospital to help me with that book launch, and to do that. And he even said, don't tell people. And I'm like, you know what? Like, people need to know that you did this. So, that's been one of my big secrets to success is I look at where I need to improve, what I can amplify, and who's there doing it, and how can I get them to help me, So it's like, and I've always kept these mentors around. Like right now I'm working with Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach, and, it's like connections are Joe, and you just have your people around for whatever you need to accelerate in.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The way I've always defined an entrepreneur, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, is professional problem solver, right? Like that's our title on a business card if we were all going to have the same one. But you've said a lot. I just figure out how to make it happen or how to do it. And that's really interesting and very important for people to know. And, I have a 6-year-old now, and he's over the last year or two, come up with the term, I can't reach the glass, or I can't, do X, Y, or Z. And every time he says that, I'm like, hey, buddy, let's reframe that. And can you ask me, how can I, instead of I can't? Right. So just replacing that with how can I, and great, you'll eventually get a solution. Right. So.
Gosh, I just think that is one of the most powerful things. All these lessons for entrepreneurs are really lessons. And I remember Dean Graciosi did this. He did like marketing lessons at one of the Genius Networks, but it was really, when you got down to it, he flipped it and said, this is what I teach my kids. And being open to possibility is one of the most powerful things. In fact, it's one I worked with Cameron Herold to help kind of dial in the next level of our company. And we created this, culture code. And that is one of the key things I realized is, I want to work around a group of people who are open to possibility, who aren't, I can't. It's like, it's how can we?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yes. And,
absolutely.
The improv lesson, the yes and.
And a part of your advice earlier, which I completely agree with, is only working with or studying people who've already, gotten the results that you want. So clearly they exist. It's possible to get that result. So there is no excuse at that point. You just got to go figure out, how to make it happen.
And they give you the shortcuts. So it's like you look at it and go, oh my gosh, the money. First of all, the money makes you do it. But the amount you save in shortcuts and not making mistakes. I mean, I've lost hundreds of thousands, actually over probably $1 million+ making silly mistakes, So actually the most cost-effective thing you can do is go find the person who's already done it and hire them to coach you through.
Yeah, I call it the stupid tax. So you're gonna pay for your education one way or another. You're either gonna pay for it, as you've just described, by getting help from someone who's already done it, or you're gonna pay for it in the stupid tax, and that's going to cost you typically a lot more in both money and time. So
I'm writing that one down, Mike. That's so good.
But it's absolutely true. There's no shortcut. It's just pick pick which one you want to pay. And so it sounds like your business right now, if you could describe where you're at, whatever you're willing to share, audience or revenue or sales or whatever, but it sounds like you're in the midst of wanting to scale if you're working with someone like like Dan or building out a team. But if you could describe us where you're at and where you're trying to get to, and let's unpack that and how you're going to make it happen.
So Dan had a great term about a mission-based entrepreneur and a lifestyle entrepreneur, and how he says, I only hang out with mission-based entrepreneurs. I went, God, I really like that. As much as I wish I could be just a lifestyle entrepreneur and just call it a day now and go, okay, everything's great. I'll just hang out now and work 4 hours a day. It is not in my nature. Like, I am on a mission. And my big goal, really, I believe that we need to take responsibility for our health, for our lives, and that there's so much misinformation out in the health world. So my big goal is to change the way we approach health worldwide. Now, what I've always done is done it myself and then taught it. That's kind of been because again, you heard me say it already, like, don't hire a coach or a mentor who hasn't done it themselves. So I have my brand business, which is Virgin Diet, Sugar Impact Diet, everything around health, fitness, nutrition. And does programs and products. And I'm always looking for how to scale that and how to increase the audience. I'm doing a big shift right now because a lot of what I used to do through TV, I've had, my own reality show. I was on Dr. Phil for a couple of years. I've had multiple PBS shows. But what I'm seeing out in the marketplace is that, social media is the new TV. It's totally disrupted it. So I'm really working on cracking a content code online to help people build their audiences. And the other company I have, so I have my JJ Virgin brand, and then I have a company called Mindshare. And that is where I teach health entrepreneurs how to become experts, really drill into a specific area, own their expertise in there, and then create their influence to, create massive impact. And that's really my passion project. And it was something that started out kind of as something for fun because I knew that we needed to get together, because I'd go to all of these marketing events and there'd be one or two health people. And I thought, gosh, we really need our own place. And so it started with 12 people in a room, and then it was 20, and then it was 60, and then it was 100, and now it's 300. This year will be 400. And we get together once a year, have a super cool event. We have an awards ceremony, very fun. Great learning where everyone pulls back a kimono, shares best practices, but really collaborates. And I've taken an industry where a lot of people would compete. And I said, people don't buy one diet book. Actually, your best source of referrals, your best place for you to work is with what you think of as your competition. And we've worked together to really collaborate. We've now created, I think, 20 New York Times bestsellers, best-selling authors, major, all the big summits, docuseries have come through that Mindshare Summit and everyone collaborating. So it's interesting to see now because we have that. We have a mastermind. I'm creating an influence workshop. But what we've created is a powerful force out in the marketplace where we are now being able to come up and stand our ground against all the stuff coming out with the ridiculous, big pharma and big food companies and some of the crap they put out into the world. So it's continuing to scale and build my consumer business, but really so that I can teach those best practices in the professional and the B2B space. And those are my two worlds I straddle. So I basically run two major, 7-8-figure businesses, which can make me a little bit crazy.
Well, that was I've got like six.
What did I do?
Yeah, I got like 6 questions in my head that I'm gonna have to get to, but that leads me to one of them, which is, what's been your biggest challenge when it comes to growing both of those?
Hiring too fast, firing too slow, instead of doing the opposite, has definitely been a big issue. I learned my lesson on outsourcing marketing. One of the challenges this last year was, when I created the Virgin Diet, right after I created it, I got another big, 7-figure book deal for the Sugar Impact Diet and 2 cookbooks. And then, you have to go in creation zone. And then right after that, I got another 7-figure deal on the Miracle Mindset. And the biggest challenge is, trying to straddle creating, marketing, running the companies, scaling them. And so what I've tried to do is outsource like the actual marketing. And I've learned my lesson on that is that every time I've outsourced the marketing, my companies go down.
When you say that, what activities are you outsourcing?
Yeah, meaning that I like tried to pull in someone to be the marketing director. And I've really realized that I have to be my marketing director, that I can have someone doing, the Shopify work and the email, like all that stuff and helping with copy and all of that. But ultimately, I still have to oversee and outline all the content framework, all the content creation. Obviously I have to be the face doing the social media and stuff. So there's just stuff that if you are the brand of your company, it's like kind of impossible to pull yourself out of. And so that's been my biggest challenge. Now I've learned through Strategic Coach how to duplicate myself a lot. But I also think that probably my biggest mistake that I've made over the last couple of years is to not drive down deep, is when you look at the people who've really nailed it, they'll pick their lane and they pick what they're going to go down and they just keep digging deep. And I need to, the big thing that I haven't done well that I'm back focusing on now is like right now in the consumer side, we're going back to Virgin Diet. We're taking it to 2.0. We're doing some super cool things with bringing in coaches. And we're just driving that deep. And until we hit specific benchmarks, I'm not going back over to Sugar Impact Diet, which is getting rebranded. And until we hit certain benchmarks, I'm actually taking Miracle Mindset. It's going to be more on my business side because it's really, mindset's much more of it really fits much more. It overlays everything in your life. Heck, if you don't have the mindset, it's going to stop you in your money, in your relationships, in your business, in your health. So it's going to overlay everything, but it'll be a deeper driver on my business side. But I'm really focusing on driving deep rather than going wide. Like go deep before you go wide. Really make sure those things are dialed. SOPing everything. I'm such a quick start and I get bored so easily. And I'm sure everyone on here listening probably can relate to that. And that's always the challenge is that the other part is not I need more project managers. That's the deficit. We've got a couple good ones. I just want to find more like them to just take my brain and make it real.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to one of those. And my personal goals moving forward in business is to build companies that are not reliant upon me, so to take me out of the equation so that I can build a business that can eventually be sold if I want to have that option.
Yeah, that's my mindshare business. For actually in the JJ Virgin brand where we're testing, except for doing the social, I'm getting to the point where I don't have to be like actively involved. And then mindshare will be the place where I can, my big goal is for it to be off of me and systems in place and people in place and to build 1,000 badass health entrepreneurs who go out there and change the world. And, what I love there is I've now helped people become more successful than me. And that's really the mark, the measure of success in that one is, can I build people using the systems so that they can be more successful than me? That's what I would say.
Yeah, very cool. One of the mental games that I'm playing with myself right now in order to accomplish that goal of building a self-sufficient business is that I can't do this stuff. Like, I don't get me wrong, I'm still doing a lot of in the weeds stuff, writing the copy and making the products and all of that. But moving forward, I'm making decisions based on the fact that I can't be the one to do it. And so it's really looking at the business from a conductor's perspective, if you were conducting an orchestra rather than, in there playing the instruments. And I would just encourage people who are listening to this to think about that more because, it took me probably 2 years to learn how to write really effective sales copy, which has been the single biggest blessing to my business life that I've ever learned from a skill set perspective, but it's also handicapped me because it's a crutch. And if I dedicate myself to spending the next 2 years learning how to essentially be the conductor and hire a team, that's the only way that I'm going to get to that scalable level.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad I never learned how to write really effective sales copy. I saved myself on that one.
It's a huge blessing and a huge curse. Absolutely.
But it is a challenge. We need to learn what works in all these areas so that we can see if it's like, that's always been my thing. I don't need to know how to, program things, but I need to know what I'm looking for so that I can tell if it's right or not. Because otherwise, when you don't know what you don't know, that's where you get in trouble.
Exactly. And speaking of that, one of the questions that I banked here to ask you earlier was the fact that you're in the health industry, and for other experts in that world, y'all are in a really unique position in the fact that you have an opportunity to take what usually starts as an information-based business and transition it into a physical products business. So I know you have a whole line of nutrition products that you've developed and that you sell. How has that impacted your business? Has that become one of the primary sources of revenue? Is it 10%, but has it made a really big impact? And is that something that you would recommend other entrepreneurs take a look at?
Highly. What I train people to do, and it's been very interesting because I started first, as one-on-one as a trainer, then as a nutritionist, and I always used products. So they were always a part of my income. And in fact, I owned a gym, and all of a sudden I turned around and realized that what was keeping the gym afloat were the products. Because when you think about it, like for me in the health world, when you look at a business and go, okay, what are my free, low, medium, and high tier offers, right? And where can I build in continuity or something that's consumable? Well, products are the perfect place for that in the health world, because generally when you get into the higher tier, it tends to be more B2B, and or in my business, you have to put a lot more of yourself, a lot more of your access in, which you don't necessarily want to do. So kind of one of the easy models that I do is build information products that organically sell the consumable products. And it was interesting with the Virgin Diet is and Lisa Sasevich is one of my best friends, and she has this thing where you reverse engineer everything. So I reverse engineered the Virgin Diet to sell the Virgin Diet shakes. We sold millions of dollars of Virgin Diet shakes without ever directly marketing them. And it was interesting because I had this epiphany. I was sitting at Strategic Coach. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to directly market the shakes. This is where we're making all of our money. But it's not as effective for me to directly market the shakes as it is for me to market the programs that then educate people to use the shakes. Then I create loyal customers. Otherwise, I create one-offs that are looking for, what's the best price. So we focus on educating and then bringing them into, whether it's the Virgin Diet or the Sugar Impact Diet, the program and the way to live, and then they get on the products. And then once you've done that, that's your low and medium ticket offers. Book would be low, program would be medium. You can add in communities and coaching, and then you can add in the products as the continuity. And then once you've dialed in your system, then you can bring other people on board who become your ambassadors, who can be your coaches or specialists, and get certified, and that's your high tier offer. So that's how you can take the health world and create the free, low, medium, and high tier offers and create the continuity through the product sales. But I see a lot of companies that just sell products, and you'll create much more brand loyalty when you do it from an education base and get them into a program and into a movement and part of that whole club and culture.
Do you work? Are you friends with, or do you ever talk to Drew Canole?
We've done a podcast together, but I don't know him, past that.
Yeah, I mean, I've just watched the same exact methodology, take off incredibly well with him and Organifi and the exact same business model, and completely revolutionized his company. From a couple, $2 or $3 million in revenue to now $20 or $30 million in revenue.
Well, that's the big thing I teach. Like I look at people who are just doing the info side, and I go, but people can't, eat that. Like, how many diet plans do you want to be creating and exercise programs do you want to be creating? I mean, like enough, it's like create those, add in, they're using the product somewhere. So, and then you look at the companies that don't have that piece of it. And like, I think of the revenue that they're leaving on the table. It just makes me kind of sick because it's literally the 10 to 20x revenue as you just described.
And I assume those who participate in essentially your business coaching, side, helping them develop their own product line is a topic that you guys cover and go over and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yes. First it's like get your category, get your subcategory, find your niche, dig it deep, own your expertise, decide what you stand for. I find people don't have what's different about you? And everyone's got it. They just can't tell because it's under their nose. It's so awesome. It's so obvious to them. They're like, doesn't everybody do this? I go, no. So it's finding that piece first that you can really build something around.
Very cool. Well, I just looked at the clock and I'm like, holy smokes, this went by fast. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we've covered so many awesome topics. I mean, we could do this for 2 or 3 hours, I think, easily. What would you like to offer folks from, final pearls of wisdom, if you will, for the last 2 or 3 minutes here?
I'm going to give you one of my little 5-day challenges that really I've seen make such an impact. And it's how I got through what was going on with Grant in the hospital, because it required me to so manage my mindset to not be like consumed with the fear of all of it. But I think that fear can stop us in everything we do. And whether it's that big jump up in our business or, taking the next step in our health. And so what I do every morning is I get up, and so I call this thing my jam. And the jam is for gratitude, appreciation, mindset. And I literally did this. If you put it in place, and I say, just try this for 5 days. So the first thing is get up in the morning, pull out a journal, physically write down at least 3 things you're grateful for, and let yourself really feel them. It takes a minute. I do it every day. Throughout the day, at some point, if things are just going sideways, you're getting in a bad mood, something's irritating you, grab your phone and text someone and tell them what you appreciate about them. Because they're going to inevitably go, wow, man, thank you so much, and send it back to you. And then at night, look at, and I had to do this in the hospital when things were so bleak. Grant comes out of the coma and he's staring off into space, moving his arm back and forth. And I'm like, oh, crap, But I go, he's alive. His eyes are open. He's moving. I'd always find what I call the little miracles or those little wins every day, and I'd hold on to those. And so that's how I frame my day. And no matter what happens, it keeps me staying focused on possibility and positivity. So I'm going to throw that out as a challenge to everybody to do. It might sound a little goofy or corny, but literally it's 5 minutes a day. And everyone who's done it, 5 days, they're like, holy.
Absolutely.
Just like you said, holy smokes, look what happened.
Completely changes your frame of reference in life and how you look at the world, and gets you focused on the positives instead of the negatives. And absolutely, that would change someone's life completely to integrate that habit. That's an awesome takeaway to end the show with here today. So this has been fantastic, JJ. Where can everyone go connect with you, check out your books, check out your products, and all of that good stuff? It's easy, jjvirgin.com. Done. Just like, see, I look at you, MikeDillard.com. Right. Oh, man, I don't know about you. It took me 5 years to wrestle that domain name away from another Mike Dillard who was not using it. But yeah, I had someone set my website up for me as a favor early on, and I had to buy it from them. So I totally... Yep. Wow. There's another story. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Well, JJ, thank you so much. This is such an incredible story, and you're such a source of inspiration and expertise in this area. I can think of at least 3 or 4 friends locally here in Austin who are personal trainers who are trying to get into, a business that doesn't require them to trade their time for dollars. And so hopefully they're going to hear this podcast because this was tailor-made for them. So thank you so much for today. Yes, they should go to mindsharesummit.com. That's the other business. Awesome. All perfect. Right. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. And thank you all for listening as usual. This has been amazing. And we'll see you next week. Take care.